All right. Well, hey, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get kicked off here this morning. So first and foremost, thank you, everybody, for attending. We appreciate you joining us today. So for approximately the next hour or so, we hope we'll be able to provide you with some useful information and have some great takeaways. So to get started, hopefully you're here for the fall protection stand down. If you're here for something different, then welcome anyway, but just know you may be in the wrong presentation. So this is the joint venture fall protection stand down. We have some folks here that we're going to go over some great information today. You're going to have a few presentations, a few videos, and then you're going to have a panel discussion. And I'm going to introduce the folks that are going to be on the panel today. The one thing that I can't stress enough is you have several decades of experience on this panel. Please take advantage of their knowledge and ask questions, and again, get feedback from them, because very rare do you have a collection of folks that have this much experience. So let me start by introducing the panel that we have today. If you see the video up there, we're going to start from the left and go left to right. First, we have Kevin Chambers. He's the area director out of the OSHA Harrisburg office. Welcome, Kevin. Next, we have Kristen Morgret. She's in charge of the safety consulting program here at RETTEW. Next to Kristen is Kelly Kramer. He's in charge of the training program here at RETTEW. Next to Kelly, you have Corey Gay. He's a technical consultant in the construction division for Liberty Mutual. Yes, he did bring an emu. For those that are wondering. And last, we have Tom Scott. He's with the McClure Company, and he's the Director of Safety. So again, I can't stress this point enough. Please take advantage. These folks have dedicated their careers to safety. They're very knowledgeable. They truly and genuinely care about people and getting everyone home safe at the end of the evening. So take advantage of that. And the last piece that I have, my name is Paul O'Donnell, by the way, and I'll be the moderator for this event. You will have an opportunity to ask those questions. So if you'll see, you have a Q&A. The questions will be handled at the end. So you'll submit them, and then we'll open it up for the panel discussion and Q&A. So we won't be taking those or fielding those questions during the presentations. And then the very last thing, then Kelly Kramer is going to have a couple of giveaways today. So he'll tell you more about them. There's a lanyard harness system, and then we have a few RETTEW backpacks. So again, appreciate everybody showing up here today. And without further ado, we'll turn it over to Kelly Kramer.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thanks for everybody for either tuning in or attending here. I really appreciate your commitment to the time. Paul did mention the giveaway. I do want to just go over that briefly. We have a pretty nice, that's a picture of it there, a self-rescue harness. So it has a self-rescue device built into it. So it's MSA makes that. So that's our primary giveaway. And then we have some nice RETTEW backpacks, 4 of those to give away at the end. So if you're attending either in person or via Teams, you're in the pool to win one of those 5 gifts. So hopefully that's not the reason we came, but just as an added bonus. I do want to start off with a video that we had prepared that has some importance of fall protection, some key points to fall protection. So we're going to kick that off with this before we turn it over to some comments from Kevin from OSHA.
I want to thank everybody for taking their time from their busy day to attend the fall protection stand down. I also want to thank our volunteers, our partner OSHA, in dedicating their time for this important subject.
You know, we all go to work every single day, and we want to go home from work every single day. Everyone here at RETTEW, we spend a lot of time out in the field, and one of the more common things that we run into is improper use or inappropriate use of tools and equipment.
Safety is a culture for us. And that's the key, is making safety a part of everything you do, because then it becomes muscle memory. And then we get to the point where it becomes preventative. And that's ultimately where we want to be. And why? Because our number one asset when it comes to safety is our people.
When it comes to fall protection, there's three key parts, actually I guess 4 key parts we want to consider. We call it the ABCs. The A is anchorage. The second one would be B, your body. That would be your harness, a full body style harness. And then the C would be connector, so different styles of lanyards. They all have advantages and disadvantages, and they all have a use. The fourth piece, which is one that people often forget, would be the rescue piece. There's several pieces of fall protection that we believe are pretty critical. The first one is selecting the proper harness. When you pick a harness, you want to make sure that it does what you need it to do. So important to get feedback from the employees that use them. Maybe pick out a couple, see how they work, try them. So OSHA requires a daily inspection by a competent person. So that has to be done every day prior to use. So you saw the impact that fall had on the dummy. Our dummy is 154 pounds. Probably a little lighter than most construction people or most people who are up there working. He fell roughly 8 or 9 feet plus his height. So if that dummy was maybe 5.5, 6 feet tall. This was a 6-foot lanyard. My arm span is roughly about 6 feet. So you can see how much extra this lanyard deployed. That's why it's really important to think about the fall distance in your anchor. To make sure you don't hit the ground. You saw how fast he fell and how much impact he fell with. This particular system that Noah is wearing is a DBI Sala suspension trauma relief device. So Noah's going to unzip the one pouch, and there would be one on each side. One has eyes on it, the other one has a hook on it, and that enables it to be adjusted. He can put one foot in there, or he can put both feet in there. And it's pretty important to go ahead and keep moving, so you can alternate those feet and then buy yourself a significant amount of time until rescue personnel or until somebody can get a piece of equipment over there to be able to assist him in getting down. This is a pretty typical setup for a vertical entry. We have this is a 9-foot tripod that is currently set up at 7 feet. It's really important that you have some sort of overhead anchor for a vertical entry. We have Noah set up here with his full body harness. We have him with his 4-gas monitor on his chest so that he can check the air quality as he enters into the space. He weighs 250 pounds, so I'm going to demonstrate how easy or difficult that is with our mechanical advantage.
We put on these joint efforts to do fall protection stand downs and things of this nature. We have a great training center here at RETTEW. We have great instructors that are truly committed to providing safety and safety training to help people every day.
One of the things that we really want to try to change as a safety culture, throughout the country, is that we're there to help the employees and to assist them so that they're able, and all of us are able, to go home at the end of the day.
Yeah, so that's just our kind of introductory video. Hopefully you were able to get a little bit of something out of that. If you had any questions regarding that, just submit those. We'll attempt to answer them at the end during the panel discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Kevin.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody present and out there in TV land. Following up after a prepared video is always a tough act to follow because, I'm a little bit more casual like that. So for those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Kevin Chambers. I'm the Area Director at the Harrisburg Office for OSHA. We oversee the 14 counties in south central Pennsylvania, north to center, out west to Fulton, east to Berks, south to the Maryland line. So for those of you out there, if you see anybody from OSHA, that's us. So this week is the National Safety Stand Down Prevent Falls. We are on the 4th day of this week. May in general is considered Fall Safety Month. Doing a number of presentations that didn't exactly fall into this week, but it doesn't mean that they're any less significant. So beginning with that, as I mentioned before, there's the national flyer. Of course, they always use these great stock photographs that show things that are being done well. But on our public website, osha.gov, there is a variety of materials out there that can be shared, as well as some things I'll cover a little bit later in slides. So, the biggest concern is that we just want to raise awareness of fall hazards out there. I mean, they're ever present in construction and in general industry for that matter, and maritime and agriculture. And as a result, there are things that can be done to prevent fatalities and injuries that are related to these falls and mitigate these fall hazards, because every single one of these is a preventable injury. So I was going to say the formatting on this got beat up a little bit from when I emailed it, but sorry for the small print edition. I assure you that this was like a 28 pitch when I emailed it. So. But every year, I mean, we've been getting thousands of employers and millions of workers involved with this in the last 8 years of doing these stand downs. And it's become, for lack of a term, a very big deal nationally. It's there's been a lot of interest and a lot of participation, and it just continues to grow. So last year, as you can see nationally, there was just everybody was involved with it. In OSHA Region 3, which includes Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, District of Columbia, and West Virginia, did a pretty decent job. The majority of the states are OSHA federal states, and our resident compliance assistant specialists were scrambling all over the place to be involved with this sort of thing. COVID did have some play. Normally our numbers on this are a little bit higher. So we're having these stand downs right here, right now. There's people all over the country that are donning and doffing fall protection equipment. Listen to folks like me talk about rules and regulations, but the biggest concern is just trying to get those good and matured hazard controls put into place to avoid bad things from happening, to protect a company's most valuable assets, the people. So down to the nitty gritty, the facts and figures, which as a federal bureaucrat, I love my numbers. So, I mean, every year there's just a significant amount of fall injuries and fall deaths that occur. We've been doing much better. There's been a demonstrable drop over time in total fall fatalities. Now, the stand down is a great way to showcase this and put it in front of everybody's eyeballs that, hey, look, we're out there and we're trying to be as consultative as we can to encourage employers to put these good things in front of their employees. However, it doesn't always work out like that. So looking at fiscal year 2021, and right now we just passed halftime for fiscal year 2022, so we don't have the stats for this year yet. But when we get out in the field and we end up, encountering employers that are not providing a safe, healthful work environment for their employees in construction, specifically on this, everything that's in the red highlight are items that are either directly or tangentially involved with fall protection. When you look at the top 4, I generally like to look at fall protection, as I call it, an LMRX approach. Subpart L for scaffolds, subpart M for fall protection, subpart R for ironwork, steel erection, subpart X for ladders and stairways. As you can see, every single one of those in red in that top 10, that you've got those 6 items that are accounting for the lion's share of what we deal with in construction. And that's a comment that goes 2 ways. One, it's out there, and number 2, it's apparent. The compliance officers, or that they see it, they have to address it. Now, when you really get looking into these top 6 and you look at the sheer number of violations, one of the things that I really wanted to concentrate on is when you look at the very top item under 1926-501, and you look at the very bottom item on this list under 1926-502. When you combine those together, those are basically specific circumstances where there was something that was not being done or was being done incorrectly for fall protection. I call Section 502, I call that the nuts and bolts of fall protection. This is your methods and practices, and everything from using your shock absorbing lanyard to lasso around a stud, and a proper anchorage point, and this type of stuff all begets one another. But a key portion of that is the fourth item, which has to deal with the actual training portion of it. And in many cases, this was a situation either where the employer just simply didn't put the training out there for their people, or here's your fall protection equipment, go use it. Or they had done something and thought they had it covered, and then they got themselves in a situation where they weren't addressing the fall hazards correctly. So when it comes down to it, and this is a quote, this is not a Kevin Chambers original. The number one trade every year that we deal with fall hazards is roofing contractors. And the quote is from a superintendent for a very reputable construction conglomerate: roofers always break the rules. I'd like to think that's not an absolute, but when you see that the roofing contractors just really lead the way in fatal falls, it's kind of a hard metric not to avoid. So essentially, and then the one way that OSHA really looks at this is we try to address this from a three-part process. And this is our every year three-part plan, provide, and train. Planning ahead for your fall hazards is the smartest possible thing you can do. And that comes down to just literally making sure that you have your field personnel have their head wrapped around the hazard and know what they need to be loading into truck to take it to the job site. Plan ahead, use your checklists, have meetings. Toolbox talks are great, but nothing beats a sit people down, look them in the eye, and have a talk turkey about focus 4 hazards. Fall protection being our number one right now. Provide that right equipment. Yes, they got to put it in the truck and make sure they have the right stuff. I mean, it's ultimately times we see situations where you have companies that they have great equipment, but they choose the wrong thing for the wrong application, and it ultimately makes sure it's all trained. All the training is occurring as being appropriately documented, and then intervene when you catch somebody that's doing something improperly. Take the time to retrain them. Do you really know what you're doing with this? Look them in the eye. Set them down. Have a conversation with them. Have them go pick up end cuts off the rest of the site for the rest of the day, so you can get it back in the house and have a discussion with them. So these QR codes can be a little difficult to use, but our fall protection stand down is a multifaceted organization, private-public partnership, where OSHA's not, our name ends up at the top of the banner, but the folks that are involved at the Center for Construction Research and Training, as well as the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, which is our sister agency out of that was co-founded as part of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, have just a wealth of great information. You're going to see the good and the bad and the ugly off of these. So what's cool about it is by participating in the fall safety stand down is you can actually get your certificates. You would have to go online. Again, everything can be found originally on OSHA.gov. Follow up on that after you've conducted some internal discussions with your staff, and then be able to put the certificate of recognitions out there. And it's a good booster shot as far as keep people's heads in the game. Hey, look, I just did this, and now I feel compelled to take a harder look at my equipment. Hey, look what we found. Hey, look what we prevented from occurring. So everybody has that role to do. This is an everyday thing. Yeah, we might be focusing on fall safety for one specific week, but this is a 52 weeks a year, 24/7 thing. There's people using fall protection all the time, and when it comes down to it, is that the things that we can do for that, to plan get out in advance, make sure that people are appropriately protected, and then conduct all that paperwork and follow-on training is, I can't overstate that. So those few minutes that somebody has now compelled to pick up their equipment that they've been using now for longer, and they probably should up and say, wow, this thing is really damaged. I really need to replace it. As we all know, as safety and health professionals, the safety and health related industry people is, that can make the difference between somebody going home or not. So I'll pause that for a second so everybody can get a good look at our public website. And that's our national hotline number on top of it, which can always be used for questions. So, okay.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I jotted a couple notes down there just to reiterate some of the things that Kevin mentioned there. There was a bunch of numbers up there. First of all, let me back up. It's not just roofers, by the way, that are messing things up. From our experience, we see everybody messing it up. So very important. That's what I want to talk a little bit about, and Kristen's going to share with you. What can you do about it? Kevin had mentioned about the planning piece and providing them, the employees, with the tools that they need, and then and the training and the knowledge to know what they're doing. So hopefully this will help you with that piece. But one of the things I did write down was roughly about 11,000. I didn't add up the total numbers of citations last year. That comes out to more than 30 violations per day, to give you some kind of idea of how much people are messing that up. Number one on the list too, as far as total mess ups per day, and number two, I think, for total incidents of causing death. Is that right, Kevin?
That's
vehicles, maybe number one.
OSHA doesn't oversee the motor vehicle accidents, but that category notwithstanding, you're dealing with falls, especially on the
it's a big
construction
number.
side.
It's like 800 a year fatalities.
Too many per year.
Yeah. So what I thought maybe just share a little bit is what can you do to put a program together if that's what you're trying to accomplish. So I just thought of 8 steps that might help with that process. The first one, and I don't know how much control the attendees have here, but it's extremely important, is that management commitment. So you need to have somebody at the top of your organization that's going to say, hey, we're going to provide you with the time, the resources, the money, the personnel that you need, and the cultural backing that yeah, we're going to do what you say we're going to do. So that management commitment is number one. It's key. Next piece in that would be employee involvement. Rather than if you're a safety person, you just throw all these policies and programs together, buy the equipment, and expect people to know what to do with it. It's just not going to work. You need the personnel who are actually going to be using it to buy into it, to be familiar with the equipment, to have some say in that. Say, hey, that's not going to work. That's a pretty nice piece of equipment there. I can see how that one would work, or hey, that one is not good. Let's go a different direction. So that employee involvement is key in that 8-step process. Moving forward, then assessing the exposures. So everybody does something different. You got industrial folks here at a pretty scary place. Roofers, that's going to be a vastly different set of exposures. So their solutions are going to be different. So we got to assess what those exposures are, figure that out. That can be through loss history. That can be through talking with the employees. That could just be visually walking around and taking a look at what are the physical hazards. And then programs aren't the most exciting piece. And I'll even go as far as saying not everybody reads those, myself included, but they are a backbone of what you're going to do and what you expect the employees to be able to do. So you do need those. Also, there's also the springboard for your training program. So you kind of got to have that backbone of what you're going to, this is what we say we're going to do, this is how we're going to approach it, what we're going to do. So that comprehensive written program is important. And then, use that for your training tool. And then the part that Kristen's going to talk a little bit about is purchasing and installing the necessary equipment. That's the one thing that we have seen over the years is if you were to go back 20 years ago, to give you an idea of how Corey and I are, and we looked at construction or fall protection equipment back then, it was pretty limited, right, Corey?
It was. I can remember when harnesses were new.
Yeah. There wasn't that much out there. Now you can get a whole Granger catalog on just fall protection equipment. And then if it's not in that catalog, other folks can help you either build or design or come up with a system that may work. So there's just a ton of stuff out there as far as equipment. So you've got to kind of figure out what you need, figure out how to get that in place. And then once that's in place, then you can start to train people on that, get them familiar with how to make that work and how to use it. And then go out there and see how it's working. Physically, are they using it? Kevin said that's one of the big ones that we see not happening. So that's step one, to use it. And then are they using it correctly? And if not, coach them, work with them, ask them, why isn't it working? Why aren't you doing this? And then correct that and get that going in the right direction. And then lastly, you do have to have some accountability for this. You can't just keep looking the other way, which I know happens. Eventually, sometime you got to put your foot down and say, hey, that's it. Whatever your disciplinary process is going to be. And we think of discipline many times as a negative thing. And I think of my kids. I discipline them because I care about them. I love them. And I want them to be successful, and I want them to be safe and healthy. So, if we think of our discipline program that way, it's a lot less, I'll say, punitive. It's more, like, hey, I'm trying to help, trying to keep you safe, and so you can go home and do the things you like to do, whatever that is, fish, hunt, sports. So that's really critical to have that kind of culture and intermingled with that program. So that was my sort of 8 pieces I wanted to try to throw out there. Hopefully there's some value in that if you're attempting to put a safety fall protection program together. Ooh. Kristen.
Oh, please.
There was a slide, didn't there?
Yeah, there was. Should we go one ahead, see if it's there? Hold while we have a technical difficulty. So, I'll say that I'll get started while Kelly's trying to pull up the slide is, with what he said, that just like many things today, the technology is advancing so rapidly with the fall protection equipment and options that are available, whether it's, for a roof, a harness. And to go along also with what Kelly said is, listen to what the employee feedback is. Those of you that can't see me, I am, on a good day, I'm 4'11", and Kelly, you're 6'1". So obviously, he and I would not want to utilize the same harness, or if we did, it would not be effective for one of us. So listen to that feedback, and if a lot of times if employees don't have something that fits well, they're familiar with, they're going to be less likely, A, to use it, which is the biggest risk, or it's not going to work effectively for them. And then again, going with that training piece, I was at a site yesterday and the maintenance manager was actually telling me how he was stuck for a half hour on their ladder climber of a 60-foot ladder last fall. And I started asking some questions, and I said, well, what kind is it? Well, I don't know. Well, has it been inspected? And he looked at me and I said, have you inspected it? He goes, no. I said, do you do an annual, and he didn't know. And so again, that training piece to make sure that, it may look like it's obvious what needs to happen, or maybe somebody should know what to do, but they really don't, especially if it's not something that's used, on a regular basis. So fortunately for them, and he made the decision, he said no one else is going to go up there, and he said, we will have it inspected, we'll find out, what the issue is, if it's something that can be corrected, or maybe we need to look at something else, because he did comment the system itself he wasn't that fond of from a comfort standpoint. So again, that you can look at, I'll say, when we look at fall protection, I always tell people, I said, you want to go with like the Yugo or the Maserati? because there's everything in between. And just because you get the Maserati, it may actually not be what is best for the situation that you're dealing with. Sometimes simple is much, much better. So, you know, there's temporary situations, there's permanent installations that you deal with. Like Kelly mentioned, there's pre-engineered systems that are off the shelf. There are custom engineering solutions for, you know, something that's a little bit more complex, where we have something that may not, you know, quite fit quite right. And I always tell people, as your focus, you have two roles to maintain. You want to reduce the risk while you're trying to get to compliance. So getting to compliance may take some time. That's our end goal, but we want to make sure, you know, we are reducing the risk. So even if we can't get to 100% compliant today, we still want to do something, so we're working towards reducing that risk and continuously improving. And the manufacturers out there, you know, there's a phenomenal amount of resources from the manufacturers themselves, different industry groups. Everybody wants to sell you something. So if we get the slide, you'll see that if you just even if you just Google beam clamp, immediately you'll come up with 75 different styles of beam clamps.
We do have beam.
So there's a wide variety. One of the other photos, and I apologize for this not working, is a guardrail system for around an open excavation. And, you know, Corey, those of us that have been around a little while, such a thing didn't exist probably even 10 years ago. So just because you have something now and you've had it for a couple of years, there may be something that is drastically better. And with that, it also could be very economical. That could make it much easier for your employees to do their work, so they're going to be efficient, and obviously they're going to be much, much safer if we don't have to, you know, if we don't run into that issue. So with that, I think we'll move over to the Q&A since we had that glitch.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we wanted to open it up to our moderator, Paul, and any questions that anybody has. So either or electronically.
Thanks, Kelly. Before we get to the questions, and we'll again we have one come in already, but we'll allow the folks to type in those questions. How about if we take a quick second, and Corey, sorry to put you on the spot, but you're next. Is there anything that you wanted to add or anything you wanted to comment on with regard to this? Feel free.
Okay, so one of the things I like to bring to the table for work at heights discussions is the hierarchy of controls. How many people are familiar with hierarchy of controls? A lot of hands going up, that's good. Let me ask you this. So when we think about fall protection, what's the first thing you think of? Do you think about a harness? Do you think about a lanyard? We're somewhat programmed to think that way. We need to change that thinking, and we need to think about the hierarchy of controls. So remember, start at the top of that hierarchy. Can we eliminate that exposure? Can we substitute? Can we provide an engineering control, such as a guardrail system, right? Can we, team that up with administrative control or work area controls? And last but not least, at the very bottom, you're going to have PPE, right? Which in this case, for a work at height exposure, is going to be the ABCs, as Kelly said. Your anchor point, your body wear, and your connecting device or your lanyard, right? So what happens if that system fails? If we select PPE as our control, what's that likely outcome if the system fails? Serious injury or fatality, right? That's the reality of that situation, that exposure. So that said, I like to just take a step back and challenge everybody to look at those situations where you're working at height. Don't go the easy route and just say, I'm going to tie off and maybe tie off at a foot level. Of course, there are products out there that are rated for those situations, but if you're tying off at foot level, the best outcome you may have is the system is going to work. There's still going to be an injury, likely, due to the fall distance, other objects that may be below the work area, things like that. So again, I challenge everybody, take a step back, implement the hierarchy of controls, try to come up with a little better situation than the last resort of tying off.
All right, perfect. I appreciate that insight. And I'm sure that's a question and a thought process that many folks don't consider. So now hopefully they add that into their process. Next, we'll go to Tom Scott. Tom, you have anything you want to add before we get into the Q&A session?
No, it's just thank you. It's great to be part of this panel. I know all these folks. I've worked with them in different settings, and this truly is a great wealth of knowledge up here. So for those of you out there that have questions, ask away. The thing I like to add is about fall protection. I could talk for days about it, and I probably bore most of you, put you to sleep, and that's not what we're trying to do. But when it comes to safety, empowering the people that are in the field, if any managers are listening, that's what's most important in my mind. And it doesn't just have to pertain to fall protection. You empower them with the authority to stop the work if it's not right. Because while you can train them and show them all the stuff that you have for fall protection, each situation is going to be different. And if they have the empowerment of stopping their work and saying, hey, I don't want to do this because I'm not quite sure, you're ahead of the game, because they know they can rely upon you and the company to provide you the right equipment and the right training. So that's kind of all I have about this. This is just another part of safety and getting people home safe at the end of the day to their families. And that's kind of why we all do what we do. So thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that insight.
Sure.
All right. Well, then we will then move into the Q&A portion. I'm going to read the first question that came in online. Then we'll ask if anybody in the room has any questions. And the first question comes to us: what are the various components that must be included in a written program, i.e. training, specific practices, rescue plan, etc.? And that question comes to us from Daniel.
I can jump in and take that. So if you take a look at the OSHA standard, you're going to get some guidance there, obviously in subpart N. Beyond that, what I'd encourage you to do is go out to the ANSI ASSP Z359 standard for the Managed Fall Protection Program. That's a very robust document that's going to give you a lot of details on how to build a best practice program.
All right. Anybody else on the panel want to jump in on that?
I'll jump in. I don't want to. Not everybody's volunteering, but yeah, that's a huge question, because it all kind of depends on the work that you do too. You have to do a hazard assessment of your workplace, and then what's in front of you and how you're going to protect your people. So that's one of the key spots where I start, is I do a hazard assessment. Years ago, I worked for a mechanical contractor, and when I started with the company, we didn't know we knew of electrical hazards, but we didn't know what we had to do specifically. So I keyed in on those things. I did a hazard assessment of what was in front of us, and I knew that, wow, we're working with live electrical equipment. I have to defer to a set of standards, and that's what Corey had mentioned here, the ANSI standards. I refer to the NFPA 70E standards to help protect my people. So once you do that hazard assessment, you'll have a better idea what you need to include in your program.
Very good. All right, the next question that comes to us is: in the world of construction, what is a common solution for employees who say, I can't reach my anchor point? And that comes to us from George Foreman.
Leading edge?
So the question is, you can't reach your anchor point.
I stand corrected. I stand corrected to say I can reach my anchor point. That's I read into that. Employees who say I can reach my anchor point is the question.
So I'm not sure where that question is going. If it's okay, I'll speak generally about anchor points. And this is going to sound very generic, but it applies. So the higher you can make your anchor point, elevate your anchor point, the better off you're going to be. Any tie-off situation, always elevate your anchor point as high as possible. That's going to allow for, greater, or I should say, it's going to reduce your overall fall distance, right? Say, for example, that you're using an SRL, right? Well, first thing we need to look at is where are we going to anchor that SRL? What type of SRL is it? Is it rated for overhead only, or is it rated for foot level, right? So let's say we're selecting and we're looking at a situation and we're going to go with an overhead anchor point. We're going to use an overhead SRL, right? What we can do, and I'm going to weave in, I think, what the question was, hopefully. What we can do is tie a small rope lanyard onto the carabiner or the snap hook on that SRL overhead. And when I need to get to that area that I'm going to tie off, I'm going to go ahead and pull that down. I'm going to connect it to my D-ring and then set that little rope or lanyard aside until I'm done, right? What is that situation?
All your SRLs aren't created equal?
They're not.
So you have some that will
Yes.
engage quicker than others?
Absolutely. Great point, Kristen. So not all SRLs are created equally. So do your homework, read the literature that comes from the manufacturer for that device. So make sure that you understand the capabilities and the limitations of that device, what it can and can't do, what the good practices are. And some are going to lock up within 24 inches. Some are going to lock up within 54 inches. So you have to account for that based on your scenario, what the fall distance is going to be. And then also, if a fall does occur, as Kelly mentioned earlier, bringing in that rescue component. How are we going to get that person up if they do fall? How are we going to retrieve them, right? So,
Like that, one thing with that, one of the things I talk about a lot of times is, taking into consideration your actual trade work involved. While your Class A and Class B SRLs are critical, you have to be concerned whether or not you have a leading edge situation about the durability of your SRL, the composition of it. I know, especially dealing with so many iron workers and finding them using something that is not robust enough that if they actually had any degree of perpendicular movement, for it to, because when you lock these things up, it's always going to come back, perpendicular to where you're actually, your anchorage point is. If you're running this thing across anything that's going to be cutting, you could set yourself up for a bad day very quickly. And if you don't flip it over, you don't see LE on it, and you're doing anything sharp, you probably don't want to use it.
Absolutely. That's a great point. So if that lanyard has a potential to contact an edge, right, at any point during the fall, you need to make certain, as Kevin said, that it's an LE rated device.
I'll add one other thing to that. If in case that person's question was, I can't reach the anchor point, which is possible.
Yeah.
We just ran into that at the Corps of Engineers about a month ago. There are devices out there. One of the ones that we use is called the First Man Up. Now it's limited. Like the one we have is limited to about a 20-foot reach, which many buildings that would get you to the top, but not everybody's buildings. But that enables you to install an overhead, what they call a cross arm strap, from down below, from the ground. And then you can install a rope grab system, which is another place to anchor onto, and they're all rated for the proper rating. And you would be able to put them, just like Corey said, above you. And also add one thing that not only above you, but behind you if you have a choice. That way, if you do fall, it doesn't come across your face, it comes across your back. It's going to hurt a little less. It's still going to hurt, as you saw from the video of fall there. But then you can adjust that anchorage point where you need it, but it enables you to get to the roof joist up above or whatever's overhead beam that you can get into. So the other option would be like some simpler things like a scissors lift or a boom lift, if you have those kind of things.
Well, that's where I was going to go with it, because sometimes fall protection isn't the answer, and you go, we need to do something differently here. And it could be a scissors lift, could be a set of scaffolding. We work with companies all the time that come in and build us wonderful platforms to work off, fully handrailed, great ladders, great access. So you eliminate that whole fall protection component altogether and all the equipment that you have to get up there first. So
Outstanding. Thank you, everybody. Before we continue with the online questions, I'd like to open it up to the room. Is there anybody in the room that has any questions? If you do, just please just state your name, who you're with, and go ahead and fire away with your question for the panel. And Kelly, if no one in the room has a question, and you can wave me off, and I'll go on to the other online questions.
Very good. Thanks, Paul. Did any of you have any questions?
Yeah, I do. I'm Dennis with Cleveland Cliffs. The D-ring that you attach to in the back, are you able to use like webbing or whether it's what we call in the fire service precinct cord or anything like that and extend that so you're able to clip off and do that legally?
You're hooking to your.
Yeah, you have to like the webbing or
He's
whatnot.
talking about an extender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're allowed to do some as long as you don't extend your fall distance more than 6 feet.
Okay.
So you can put a little cheater on there. I know as I get older, my shoulders don't bend as much as they used to.
Well, and that's,
so sometimes it's hard to reach back there. So a little like 6 or 12 inch extension is very helpful to help you get hooked into your back. You don't have a buddy to help you out there.
And it would be a pre-engineered piece.
Yeah, it has to be
You know,
designed for
like
that
a cross
purpose,
it
yeah.
wouldn't just be a standard,
Wouldn't just
you know,
be,
cross
Yeah.
it, but
Find a piece of rope laying on the
manufacturers.
ground.
right, yeah.
yeah.
Everything has to be rated for fall arrest.
That's a great question. We run into that all the time.
Well, and it's been a big thing. We've asked, then we get no, we get yes.
Comes down to the fall distance, and that's
Yeah.
where you might be getting to know where your
Device.
tie-off point is. If it's too low, that might increase it past that 6 foot, and what that does is, when you fall greater than 6 foot, puts a heck of a lot of force on your body, and that's what they're trying to avoid.
Rob, you had your question. Oh,
Oh my God. Tom Second, Cleveland Cliffs. You mentioned engineering out the risk, and I don't think that can be emphasized enough. I've been on a lot of projects in my lifetime, and you go up there and you have 20 people standing around ready to get into all the fall protection and everything else. And then lo and behold, you find out that you don't even have to do the job that way. You can engineer it out and maybe access some other way and totally eliminate it. So I do agree with you. That's the first thing that I think everybody needs to look at.
yeah, you do always want to ask that question is, do we have to do this or do we have to do it this way? Use your brain, think,
Right.
is there another way to do this?
Yeah, we're working with a lot of progressive companies that are working with prevention through design,
Yeah.
which is we look at the project before it starts, and we figure out how we can eliminate all the hazards, so we don't have these stop and go situations, trying to figure out how to get to our work, so it's been advantageous.
Yeah, let me add something on there. And that's one other factor is that, yes, this is mostly a construction-oriented situation, but when you're dealing with something in general industry and you're dealing with a fixed process that's being used over and over and over and over again, and, you know, it's normally weird for the government guy to say this, but you can actually, realize a substantial cost saving over time for the amount of, by putting a guardrail system or some sort of other keep somebody away from the hazard scenario, as opposed to taking the time and having to outfit the fall protection equipment that has a tendency to get nastied up over time in a dirty environment. And when you look at on the aggregate of it, as Tom had mentioned, putting the PTD out there and saying, well, do we even need to have these 5 people within 10 feet of this process? And again, it's simply a matter of, well, we've always done it this way. Well, do you really have to? And in general industry, looking at both the construction and general industry areas side by side, is that you have, in some cases, an advantage in general industry of being able to see something in its steady state operation, as opposed to looking at from the construction side is where the job site changes every 5 feet. So, absolutely.
Good question, good comment. Rob, do you have a question?
Rob Loriello from RETTEW. Question for Kevin. You talked about that 13% decrease in fatalities since 2019. What do you attribute that to, and do you think COVID played a factor?
Well, I mean, yeah, sure, you got to play Stump the OSHA guy, right? So always a favorite during one of these, but, these statistics come from Bureau of Labor Statistics. I mean, they're looking at 50 states and territories, throwing it into a blender, hitting puree. As far as for the actual reduction in fall deaths on the whole, while the fall protection stand down is a key component to getting the awareness out there, is that for what it's worth, there's a lot of people out there with cell phone cameras that just love to see people making what they think is a mistake. We get stuff sent in all the time. I get texts from my own family, Dad's safe. And the fact is that people are much more cognizant, society is much more cognizant of people falling. I mean, you go on Facebook and almost every day you've got a picture of somebody taking a header off the roof because they didn't set their ladder correctly, or they're taking their Christmas lights down. You know, maybe I almost want to call it the Clark Griswold effect. You know, where people love to see people, or Tim Allen effect, where people love to see people getting hurt on videos. And what it does is it just sort of created a societal shift in let's not be up there playing the person on the flying trapeze while doing work, that you can actually be smarter about it. So while this type of thing, and I'm sure COVID had some piece to it, I mean, the construction work never really stopped. I mean, there was a pause of what, like 60 days? I don't know, it ended up I worked all the way through.
2 for us.
2 days?
2 days.
Oh, okay. But on the whole is that people are more societally aware of bad things happening to people, whereas before it wasn't. That's just philosophy. I don't have any statistics back there.
Appreciate it.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%.
Now, we have time for a couple more questions. Oh, I do have one in the room here.
Hi, Matt Chamberlain for two. I actually have 2 questions. One for Kevin. The sheer number of violations started, right? And I'm just wondering, is there any percentages tracked, out of 100 inspections, there's 25% violation rate? Just wondering if there's anything like that, hey, these are the good ones out there, but there's 50% bad ones,
Well, it's interesting to say it, because I mean, a lot of people look at OSHA as we're the safety police,
Right.
And what Kristen had mentioned before about just trying to reach that minimum level of compliance before you start getting into the even better things that you can do on time. Ultimately, it comes down to the individual employer and what their culture is, what their mindset is. And in many cases, and Tom and I were talking about this a little bit before, you get smaller businesses to take on work that's way beyond their ability. And they're trying to do better because, hey, look, we got this great opportunity. We can get X number of dollars of additional profitability to put back in the company because we want to buy this piece of equipment, whatever. As far as you were talking about looking at the total percentages of it, the OSHA offices were not all one size fits all, because we're all dealing with different sizes of coverage area, different sectors of industries that are more prevalent than others. You have the state plan elements that are in there. It would probably make for a very good doctoral thesis for somebody to lay that all out. But where we generally will come into an inspection, say we have a programmed inspection to go look at a larger construction site, we, in time, the gain wisdom is we can see where you have these managerial elements and where the focus and I wrote down the 8 items because I was intrigued by this. Where you had the continuous auditing, where you had the greater degree of accountability to make sure that things are not going to progress beyond, well, I did this once, I got away with it. Well, next time somebody laid eyes on it, and the peer accountability and whatnot. Hey, what are you doing? Tie off. Hey, what are you doing? No, don't put that anchorage in like that. And then what that does is it reduces compliance officer putting eyeballs on something improper occurring. So it's,
Gotcha.
There's a voodoo science in there somewhere. I haven't quite figured it out yet. But.
Probably wouldn't be sitting here if you figured it out.
Yeah, exactly. Now, everybody was self-policed.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin, we're gonna keep you on the hot seat because this next question comes in, and I believe it's directed for you. It states, this is from John Schneider. Lean safe ladders are becoming more common in construction. Has OSHA encountered any issues with their use leading to injuries?
The one thing I can safely say is that you can be 100% OSHA compliant and still end up having a worksite fatality. It happens all too often. Unfortunately, the technology is greatly outpacing what's actually written in the standards. So John Snyder would, being Bo Duke and, driving fast cars would understand that, the concept of outpacing there. But the concept of lean safe ladder is not written in the standard. If you really want to get into the American Ladder Institute, better and best practices are involved with it, where you're really going to encounter that. In general, as long as the ladder is still being used and inspected and maintained in the way that's already laid out in the existing subpart X, you're going to be set up for success. I mean, ladder technology is not new. They've had it since forever. It's hard to see that where you would have any technological improvement that would occur to the actual design and application of a ladder system that still would not be well served by what's already written in black and white. So stick to the basics, use the better equipment. You're probably still going to be very successful with it. I know that's called the government two-step, me dancing around that, but it's not, I can't speak to it if it's not written in the law.
Understood. Anybody else have a comment on this?
Yeah, there's 5 other people in this panel.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how about if we take one last question, unless there's any other questions in the room, and then we'll get to the giveaway section.
Matt,
So,
Yeah, Paul, this is Matt King again. I did have one on anchoring points. Thinking about an industrial facility, if you don't have, you're concerned about the validity of the anchoring point. What are the steps you should take to figure out, hey, this is solid, it can sustain a fall, or, just wanted to kind of run that down, might help everybody on the phone as well.
I'll take that one. With a lot of the pre-engineered components, the manufacturers have, if you read the fine print, they will give guidelines and some information as to, a basis for calculations or determinations, or what might be, acceptable or adequate for those type of, locations in the absence of true structural engineering, calculations. It certainly, comes with a warning and, all the obvious, does it look like it's going to hold it? Does it meet what the manufacturer says and things like that? So if you get into the fine details, they give guidance, even like roof trusses, like somebody would typically look at like just a standard home roof truss and go, oh, that's going to snap. But the manufacturers have developed products based on
PCSI.
We have standard construction practices that they'll say, when installed in this manner, this should be acceptable.
There's another piece to that. In G359, which Corey has over here, and I'm not going to paraphrase, so I probably get a little bit wrong, but a competent person, so somebody who's knowledgeable, somebody who's trained, can assess that beam, that bar joist, whatever. And if they're reasonably certain, I think that might be not quite the exact wording, but they got to be like, hey, that is going to hold, versus, I'm not sure. What do you think, Kristen?
Right. Yeah, if you have a 36-inch, I-beam and, versus a 2x4.
If that's the case, then it's okay to anchor to that under Z359. Kevin, you guys okay with that?
Well, I mean, in general is that the thing with a competent person is, and again, it's ultimately to the employer to deem who their competent person is, and there's nothing I hate more than after something bad happening than having to impugn the competency of competent person. Whereas, why'd you tie them? Well, I thought it would work. Well, how did you determine that? Well, looked good. All right. Well, what did you base looking good upon? And it's Z359 does. Our standards are written to a certain level of basic compliance. That is your better and best practice. And if you really want to do things well, I strongly encourage looking beyond what's simply written in the Code of Federal Regulations. Again, that is across all sectors of industry or all trade work and construction, with some rare exceptions, of course. But it's good. That's generally better. There's no other way of putting it.
And was the question also pointed to permanent facilities, like an industrial application, or?
Yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking.
Okay, okay,
Hey, I got
so-
this beam here, is it okay to tie on?
Right. So I would say, and just to add to all the conversation, when in doubt, trust but verify, and verify using a structural engineer, professional engineer. Take a look at it, make sure that it's going to meet those requirements. If it's a permanent anchor, let's say a roof anchor that's installed on the roof of an existing facility, there are, of course, design, installation, testing requirements for those. Again, pull in an engineer to take a look at that situation to make sure it's going to be adequate.
And to complement what Corey's saying, when you hear bring in an engineer, what does everybody think? Big money, right? It's actually very reasonable to do that, and very worth it. So don't let that shy you off from wanting to do that. So it's a great move.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that thought.
This last question that came in is related to this. So, and it kind of to your point there at the end when you said, is this a fixed facility? The question, it says, if I can't set up a tripod because of a space restriction or being on top of a tank, what is an acceptable anchor point? So this question kind of goes after the non-permanent situation. Do y'all want to tackle that one?
And that kind of goes along with it. Again, I'd say as simple as a Google search, because there really is a wide variety of, I'll say, modified or non-standard anchorage points, connectors that are low profile, are made to go, or intended for those tight spaces where you don't have the room for a tripod. They connect right to hatches. They have stuff that goes on the tailgate, the hitch of your truck. Wide variety of options that are out there. And maybe you don't always want the time for a salesperson, but the vendors out there are usually very, very knowledgeable about a wide range of products that they can introduce you to with that type of thing.
Okay. Any other questions in the room? All right, well, hearing no questions, we will just move to the closing piece, the giveaways. Our support group has done a great job with a random number selector. So they have pulled the names. I'm going to save the fall restraint for last. If you're in the room, you can pick that up today. If you're not in the room and joining online, we'll work on getting it sent out to you. So the backpacks are going to go to Daniel Burnt, and if I pronounce your name incorrectly, I apologize. Next is Mike Kalka.
I knew.
Okay, Tom Seckman and Seth Core. And then last but not least, the fall restraint system is going to go to Katie Snott.
All right.
So I'll leave Kelly to do the final, but again, I just want to thank all the panel folks for showing up today. I want to thank all the attendees for showing up today. I really, truly hope you had some takeaways here. We're always here as a resource for you. It's not just today. This doesn't end today. So please, I encourage you, reach out to your area OSHA office. I know the old saying, they're from the federal government, we're here to help, but listen, they have good folks in that office and they truly are there. They want to be more of what they want to be is a resource for you. And folks need to understand that they're there in that job. They have a vast knowledge base and understanding. So please reach out to that office, ask questions, do what what Tom was talking about, do those preventative planning steps to get ahead of a job. Don't wait till you're in the middle of the job. And again, just use as many resources as possible. So again, Kevin, Kristen, Kelly, Corey, and Tom, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time and your insight. Kelly, anything else from your end?
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you for everybody for volunteering their time, for your attendance, and just echo what Kevin had said originally. Just we see a fair amount of increase in this kind of stuff after a meeting like this. You know, people are more aware. That tails off fairly quickly. So try to be as diligent as you can be to put those controls in place and keep after it, because it is still a big problem that we're having, and I don't think anybody wants to not go home in the same way that they showed up at the beginning of the day. So thank you all for your time, for your attention. That's all I have.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, I think they did, but I guess we're gonna go get it afterwards.